Part 16. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 151. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. After finishing the day's work, the assistants got up and said goodbye and left. Unlike usual, in today's room besides Makoto Takahashi, who was lying on the sofa, there was also Lee Byung-ian, the cartoonist's assistant, who said nothing. There is no so-called friendship between the two, nor is there the legendary revenge for killing the father, hatred for taking away the wife that hides the possibility of infinite counterattacks. It is just a simple master-servant relationship. Hello. I'm very sorry, Ah-chan. The person who took the initiative to speak was Lee Byung-in. He was not accepting the card-issuing branch that he refused without hesitation, nor was he reluctantly saying goodbye to his gay friend because of his feelings, but he was expressing his apology with a sincere expression. As for the reason for the apology, it is that after the completion of Steel, Lee Byung-in will return to his hometown to get married, and at the same time, he will also give up the professional title of cartoonist assistant. Have you decided yet? After a moment of silence, Makoto Takahashi raised his head and looked at Lee Byung-in, with an uneasy smile on his face. Ah-chan, what do you want to say? Lee Byung-in showed a tangled look on his face. He was immersed in his own world and completely ignored the dangerous smile on Takahashi-chan's face. Instead, he was talking to himself. If you choose to continue drawing comics, you won't be able to marry her. After all, her father's request is, actually, I really want to continue drawing comics, but about that. Are you thinking why you can only choose one of the two and not have the cake and eat it too? Makoto Takahashi showed a look on his face that was quite familiar to Lee Byung-in. Then think about the other options. For example, you have not been able to get married to the one you love, and because you have lost the support of the association, your so-called life has fallen into a hell of despair. And you also regret your choice, ignorance, and arrogance. Impulsively, he fell into a dark abyss from which he could not save himself. From then on, he indulged in nightclubs every day and had various shameless relationships with different bartenders. After spending all his savings, he gradually fell into depravity. Finally, he dragged his hungry and cold body to live on the street, living in the presence of others. He died alone and sadly under the contempt and discrimination he received from the bereaved dog. Hey, this unfolding is 100 times more cruel than the death flag of go back to your hometown to get married after the war, Lee Byung-in roared with a black line on his face. The more he listened, the more he felt that behind Makoto Takahashi's back the evil of this world is approaching. This is a curse. This is definitely a curse. And this way of speaking, isn't it what Kimberly said to Al in the comics before? My apostle, don't show such a sad and frantic expression. With a faint sigh, Takahashi Makoto temporarily abandoned his madness and secondary personality and switched to the absolute rational mode. Since you have chosen the route of wife control, keep moving forward with this innocent persistence and desperate obsession. Even if you reach the abyss of despair in the future, don't regret it. Speaking of this narrative method, are you sure the seal is still there? It feels like the limbs of the seal Chennai Takahashi Makoto have been gathered in my hands. In response to Takahashi Saichu's words, Lee Byung-in's mouth twitched wildly, and he didn't know how to continue. Although I haven't mentioned it before, looking at Makoto Takahashi's Chuyunier expression that understands everything, the words Lee Byung-in had prepared before were stuck in his throat at this moment and he couldn't speak at all. Lee Byung-in's personal inner tangle was directly bombarded to ashes in front of Jean-Er's fantasies. Actually, my slave, you have already made a decision in your heart, right? Looking at Lee Byung-in, who was furious and about to go berserk, Takahashi Makoto interrupted the opponent's state of accumulating strength with a single word. The reason why you feel it is difficult to make a decision, it's just because of the arrogant emotion and the existence of that inherent human skill that makes you feel confused. Is that so? Although he tried his best to deny it, Under the gaze of Takahashi Makoto's see-through expression, Lee Byung-yeon finally sighed and admitted frankly, "That's true. Then after Steel is finished, you can go back to your hometown and get married. As my most loyal slaves, let us keep the myth of Steel being the number one consecutively until the end, and write it into the Yorong Society, no, the entire in the history of the world. Our names will be recorded in history together, as a gift before leaving, as a wedding gift, it will give you an unforgettable blessing." Makoto Takahashi said this without hesitation. As he spoke, the unshielded right eye shone with a light known as fanaticism. "This gift is a reward for your hard work for the crazy cartoonist Phoenix Academy Jishin. My devout servant Musa, please hold your chest high and accept it calmly. Although Chang, what you said is so passionate, but..." Lee Byung-yeon's tone was full of resentment, and on his face, there was this resentful and abandoned look again. "Can I say no?" "Objection." Takahashi Seiryu slammed the table and stared at Lee Byung-yeon righteously. "There is a huge problem with the witness's speech before. Please repeat the testimony just now." "Hey, are you not allowed to refuse?" "I understand." Lee Byung-yeon sighed helplessly, looking at Takahashi Chang's home. A trace of hesitation flashed in his eyes, "But Chang, don't tell me about this matter yet. Zyakui and the others. After all. Since it is your wish, then." Makoto Takahashi took out a piece of paper full of words from the desk. "Sign the contract. Don't show that look, this is the rule of the world we live in. Don't underestimate this, a contract signed with the soul. Anyone who betrays or breaks the contract will be punished by the light ball of the infinite God and forced to embark on a journey of survival to understand the meaning of life and truly live. It's really an extremely cruel punishment. Although I didn't understand it at all, I had an unclear feeling about how serious it was." After Lee Byung-yeon sighed, he obeyed Takahashi Makoto's wishes and quickly wrote his name. "Thank you, Chang. Thank you very much." "Humph. Don't try to increase your favorability by thanking you. I have no love for all male humanoid creatures." In order to hide his seemingly arrogant tone, Takahashi Makoto tried to make up for it through taunting skills. "The words of thanks, just say it once, anyone who says it twice is an idiot. Really, you were able to evolve into a black-faced silver beast before, but after you changed your job to a wife control, you even abandoned your soul? This is the case, and so is the guy next door. Sure enough, apart from the murderous people in the Phoenix Academy, they are all a bunch of idiots who have lost their moral integrity. Is this world really hopeless? Destroy. Destroy completely. Return to chaos. I'm really sorry for being a wife control idiot." One voice after another sounded at the same time, and the stereo surrounds the comments. While the effect was outstanding, it also shocked Makoto Takahashi. Damn it, when did Lee Byung-yeon master such brutal abilities? This is a long-lost secret. Look at Lee Byung-yeon's eyes that look like he's finding his compatriots. Okay. A certain Huang Mao who was talked about before stood in front of the door with an angry look on his face, his eyes flashing with a burning desire to fight to the death. Huang Mao actually changed his job and became, no, should I say he completely turned into Cao Ama. There are powerful enemies in front of him and pursuers behind. This kind of development is definitely not the choice of Steins Gate. Takahashi Cheng lowered his head and pondered. After a moment, he looked up at the ceiling and said, "Is this your trial, Wanyan Loli, Gaia? I will not give in, nor will I compromise. I will fight to the end with the consciousness of dying together. Minions of Gaia, use your souls to remember my crazy and evil name, Phoenix Academy, ferocious." The huge roar startled everyone on the entire floor. Immediately afterwards, there were continuous muffled sounds of objects hitting the floor, causing the onlookers who wanted to find out what was going on to quickly disperse. Metal continues to occupy the first place ferociously, and will mercilessly kill any comics that try to challenge. Even Inuyasha and Slicker, who are called brothers, received the same treatment without exception. In Slippery Ghost, the chapter where the cow ghosts have just started to rebel gives readers a good feel for the heroic spirit among monsters. Rikuo switched to the monster form, completed a Hyakuki night walk, and rescued his human classmates from the rat monster. Although Rikuo's human classmates include the Onmyoji, who are the natural enemies of monsters, he still didn't hesitate at all and rescued the Onmyoji's little sister from the monsters. There is a need to repay a favor and worry about reward. As heroic monsters, the Nuliangami naturally proves through their actions that monsters also have heroic hearts. However, even with that cool and handsome appearance, even with the help of Hyakuki Yaka, he still couldn't win the first place from Steel. It's not that the plot of Slippery Ghost is not as exciting as Steel, it's just that the style of Steel has undergone major changes recently. Whether a comic is exciting depends not only on whether the plot is interesting, but also whether the quality of the painting itself is acceptable. Although there are many comics with good plots, they were almost hidden because the characters were not pleasing to the eye and the drawing itself was too rough. This kind of thing has happened many times, whether it was the world that Takahashi Makoto lived in before or this parallel world. Cheng, Mustang can't draw like this here. The anger in his eyes is not expressed. It should be said that it is not expressed enough. Lee Byung-yin returned the comic manuscript in his hand to Takahashi Makoto, with a fanatical look on his face. Emotions come from the heart. The anger towards the death of his best friend, the hatred towards envy, abandoning all rationality and turning into a vengeful ghost, Mustang. Just adding shadows to the corners of his eyes to highlight his strength is not enough at all. Under modification. When Makoto Takahashi took over the manga manuscript, he also handed over the new manga manuscript to Lee Byung-yin. Same as before, the sewer pipes appear too frequently in this episode, so it goes without saying much about the details and textures, and remember to draw the interlaced and twisted pipes clearly. Understood. After taking over the comic manuscript, Lee Byung-yin immediately entered high-speed drawing mode. It was as if the two people had received the auxiliary skill of Evil Frenzy and fell into an almost crazy mode. The content of the recent chapters of Steel Refining, whether it is the description of the characters' expressions or the description of the background, is so detailed that it will surprise readers. Makoto Takahashi's painting level will not be discussed for the time being, but the outburst of his assistant Lee Byung-yin is definitely beyond the usual level. After observing it, Landai next door lamented that Lee Byung-yin's delicate painting skills in terms of background details were almost as good as Mr. Nakai, who returned to his hometown. In order not to leave any regrets, you must go all out to paint. Before I leave, I want to witness Steel becoming the king of the comic book world. Even if I leave, I want to let the readers of Full Metal Alchemist feel my love for comics. After all, this may be the last time I draw comics. With such an idea, Lee Byung-yin implements the will that he has never told anyone in his heart every time he picks up the pen and puts it down. Although Takahashi Makoto, as a god teammate, has never discussed this matter in depth with Lee Byung-yin, but he seems to have felt Lee Byung-yin's determination and will. This kind of godly cooperation with an explosive degree of tacit understanding has explained everything. Since you have decided to leave, you must leave with a smile. Regrets, guilt, etc., completely retreat. Go forward with firm belief, grit your teeth and don't look back. The memory called hot blood will be the best gift for my farewell to my friends. Takahashi Makoto and Lee Byung-yin's ultimate combination skill - excellent painting style assault is activated. Come on occasionally, ha 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 ha. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do SD Mao. Chapter 152. After activating the combined skills, you can usually easily obtain achievements such as Annihilation in all directions or Super Kill. Although the previous Steel has always maintained the first position, the comics ranked behind it still have the possibility of competing, catching up and overtaking it in terms of reader support. However, after Takahashi Makoto and Lee Byung-yin's combined skills were activated, In addition to allowing Steel to maintain the #1 position, it also gradually widened the gap with other comics in terms of votes, and gradually became a comparable comic to other comics. An object that cannot be pursued. For readers, the recent serialization Steel Refining is a good explanation of the so-called truth of equivalent exchange. The two Edward brothers who wanted to pursue their mother's warmth paid the price of losing the feet to stand and try to pursue, and the body that could feel the warmth. The teacher Ismai who wanted to have a child lost the ability to give birth to a child. Ability, Mustang, who was trying to see clearly the future and destiny of the country, lost his eyes that could see the future. Giving appropriate despair to complacent human beings, this is the so-called truth. If you want to get something, you must give something. This is the so-called truth. Looking at the interpretation of the truth in the comics, many readers feel like they suddenly have an enlightenment. Brotherly love is often used to describe the relationship between brothers. In Steel, the price Edward paid in exchange for Al's soul was his own arm. It is only now that many readers have realized why the price Edward paid in exchange for Al's soul was his own arm. After seeing the explanation of equivalent exchange in the comics, many readers also thought about it privately. Did the cartoonist named Phoenix Academy Jujhen have such a layout in mind from the beginning? For those in the editorial department, many editors have been discussing whether the Steel will maintain the #1 spot until the end. In the beginning, Makoto Takahashi's extremely arrogant speech was naturally regarded as the arrogance of a young man who had achieved success, but as Steel Refining has maintained its first position and continued to expand its leading advantage, many editors they all rebelled without moral integrity, and either openly or covertly through Yoshida, began to cheer for Takahashi Makoto, hoping to turn the arrogant words before into reality. Steel is a fusion of the two people's will. The satisfaction level on the reader's side continues to rise, and the expectations on the editor's side continue to rise. However, the actions of Makoto Takahashi and Lee Byung-yin seem to make the thoughtful Aoi Ueno notice something unusual. After all, girls have more delicate minds, and with the addition of an assistant from Steel Refining, the style of the comic has become more delicate. If it is just 1 or 2 words, it can be understood as casual, but it has always maintained such fine and delicate characters. I'm afraid anyone would notice something unusual about the style of painting, right? By the way, did something happen between those two people recently? After finishing the manga manuscript in her hand, Ueno Aoi stretched, looked at Makoto Takahashi and Lee Byung-yin who were in a state of frenzy, and quietly asked Ding Ding beside him, "Why do I feel like these two people are hiding something from us?" "Probably not." Ding Ding stopped painting, rubbed his sore right hand, his eyes wandered back and forth between Lee Byung-jin and Takahashi Makoto, and then silently shook his head. "It's just that Xiao Litzi hasn't gone back at night recently, it seems. I have been drawing comics here at Cheng. Isn't it true that you have a lot of work on Steel?" When Mr. Yoshida came to pick up the manga manuscript, didn't he say that Steel was about to be finished? "It's just because it's almost finished, so the workload has increased." Ueno Aoi took out a completed manga manuscript from the table and complained angrily, "Look at this outrageously detailed manga manuscript. These two, I don't know why this guy is so crazy, but he draws the cartoons so delicately. It's really, thanks to these two jerks, it takes twice as long to finish the work that I could barely finish every day." Listening to Ueno Aoi's resentful complaints, Takahashi Makoto and Lee Byung-yin looked at each other with dark circles under their eyes and showed the same smile on their faces. The brushes in their hands showed no intention of stopping at all, and continued to dance rapidly on the manuscript paper. According to the content of the contract, Makoto Takahashi did not inform any assistants about Lee Byung-yin's departure. Although she was full of doubts, she had to praise Ueno Aoi's professional ethics. After a short break, Ueno Aoi was ready to take a new manga manuscript from Takahashi Makoto and continue working. However, this time she was interrupted by Takahashi Makoto. "Rejected. All the drawings for Steel have been completed, Looking at Ueno Aoi, who looked tired, Takahashi Makoto shook his head gently. Next, you need to enter the adjustment stage and have a good rest. The remaining work will be done by Brother Musa is here to finish it. But, seeing everyone busy, Ueno Aoi felt a little embarrassed. You can't just let me rest alone. Xiaoquei, leave the rest of the work to us. After feeling Takahashi Makoto's explain it yourself look in his eyes, Li Byungyin couldn't help but interject, anyway, the last bit of content can be done all night long tonight. Done. It's me, deliberately ignoring Ueno Aoi's confused eyes and the mocking and contemptuous rolls of his eyes from other assistants. Takahashi Makoto took out his mobile phone and entered the report to observer mode with a serious face. The plan has been completed, and the unsuspecting slaves are now working hard. Well, it's just as planned. No, it should be said that it's easier than expected. I used the magic of telepathy to encourage a little. Number 1, the experimental subject immediately fell into a frenzy stage and became a plaything that can be used at will. Unlike other assistants who rolled their eyes wildly, Li Byungyin, who was drawing comics, unconsciously increased the strength of his pen and drew eye-catching marks on the manuscript paper. Sensing the devilish smile on Makoto Takahashi's face, Li Byungyin tried his best to deny it, but unfortunately, the experimental subject number 1 and the plaything mentioned by Makoto Takahashi were undoubtedly him. So Li Byungyin, who merged the experimental subject and the plaything, waited until all the assistants left, still buried his head, holding the brush sadly, and kept painting, painting, painting. Phew. It's finally done. Looking at the completely dark sky outside, Li Byungyin placed the last page of drawings on the table and looked at Cheng Takahashi doubtfully. So Cheng, do you have anything to say to me? Did I say that? There are a lot of things I want to say, but at this time. Makoto Takahashi flicked his fingers and a smile appeared on his face. When it comes to men's romance, it really is still. Before Takahashi Makoto finished speaking, Li Yulai quickly ran out of the kitchen, followed by Ding Haru, holding a huge wine bottle in his mouth and a tray on his head, which contained 2 huge wine bottles. Bowl. Seeing the smile on Makoto Takahashi's face, Li Byungyin sighed and patted his face gently, trying to relieve the fatigue after work. Filling 2 huge bowls with wine, Li Byungyin consciously reached out and took one of the bowls without Takahashi Makoto opening his mouth. His face was filled with complicated expressions. He looked at Takahashi Makoto's smiling face and sighed helplessly. With a cry, he raised the bowl filled with wine in front of him. Don't show such an expression when drinking, Makoto Takahashi frowned slightly, complained unhappily, and immediately put on a smile. Apart from smiles, any complicated emotions will make the wine taste bad. Yes. Cheng, you are right. As if he had figured out something, Li Byungyin took a deep breath and put on a smile. Then, at times like this, anything you say is a bit embarrassing. Makoto Takahashi put the bowl to his mouth, smile, and drink. That's all. What a pity that I couldn't, as a cartoonist's assistant, witness the person in front of me dominate the entire cartoon world. I gave up midway, just like a deserter, unable to face the partners I worked with before. Life always repeats this kind of dilemma. When I have to give up one of them, I still feel a little reluctant. The sketch that I worked overtime and stayed up late to complete will shine with the final light before I leave. My arms are a little sore. I didn't notice it before. It's because I concentrated too much on drawing comics. My nose is a little sour, it must be because the taste of this wine is too pungent. The 2 of them sat on the ground, taking one mouthful after another, quickly or slowly, one bowl after another, quickly or slowly, without any words or eyes communicating. The wine in the bowl seemed to be the best language. You don't have to say what you want to say or what you want to convey, you just need to, yes, just drink the wine with a smile on your face, and that's it. As expected, a man's romance is to put everything he wants to say in wine, drink it all in one gulp with a smile on his face. The next day, Yoshida came to collect the manga manuscripts. Looking at the manga manuscripts piled on the table, there was a black line on his face. Logically speaking, there should not be so many comic manuscripts for the 3 comics. But this thickness, this quantity. My familiar cat, except for the normal number of manga manuscripts of Inuyasha and Slicker, the rest are all manga manuscripts of Metal Steel. Makoto Takahashi hiccuped, lazily lying on the sofa. He explained to Yoshida with his eyes closed, I will leave all the manga manuscripts of Steel to the completion to you. If it were normal, I would see you going back and forth between associations and organizations in order to receive the manga manuscripts. Running around might make me feel happy, but I don't feel that way these days. Is that so? I see. With a gloomy face and dull eyes, Yoshida has fallen into the first stage of darkening mode. Seeing Makoto Takahashi's defenseless look, Yoshida picked up the manga manuscript in his hand and prepared to charge up his attack. It turns out that in your eyes, I am just like a clown. Please don't insult the sacred title of clown. The only person who can be called a clown is that green-haired man with a 1,000-year-old face, and you. Makoto Takahashi seemed to have thought of something. After a moment of silence, he closed his eyes. He continued, it's just a familiar cat. From a purely low-level perspective, it might as well be Ruri-chan who has mastered the secret of cute killing. Oh, by the way, my familiar cat, there is something else I need you to do. Finish. After saying such excessive words, do you still expect me to help you? Moreover, when asking someone to do something, you even unconsciously use the tone of commanding others. At this time, it is useless to say anything. Even if you beg for mercy, you must kneel down and apologize sincerely after being beaten. Yoshida's hidden face showed a somewhat hideous smile, ready to enter the second stage of blackening mode. Because Lee Benjian returned to his hometown to get married, a new assistant is needed. Takahashi Makoto's voice was a little low. About the new assistant, in addition to mastering the necessary skills, you must also understand the romance of men. As for the time of contact, it will be after Full Metal Alchemist finishes with a consecutive first place. The glory that belongs to you cannot be replaced by others. The glory created by us will make the whole world kneel down completely under the most dazzling light. But if I stop moving forward, I will be even more unable to face you, my friend. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 153. According to the general story development, the villains who are hostile to the protagonist, especially the enemies that the protagonist will face in the end, all the evil plans formulated in the story will eventually fail at the critical moment due to various reasons. As a result, the plan that has been carefully planned for many years finally died, and at the same time, it also reaped a very miserable end, which indirectly made the protagonist famous for saving the world and mankind. Although the development of this plot is already familiar to readers, such a long-foreseen ending is still popular with many readers. However, the comic Full Metal Alchemist did not play according to this routine and played a new mode. Since its birth, the little man in the flask has successfully completed the first large-scale human transformation by luring the slaves who did not have a name at the time, that is, the future Hohenheim. The newborn little man in the flask separated the 7 original sins of mankind from himself. After several years of hard work, he is ready to launch a large-scale human transformation again, and then intends to pull the so-called God off the altar. With the serialization of the comics, many readers have gradually seen clearly the whole plan of the little man in the flask. Although the ultimate goal of the little man in the flask is not very clear, many readers believe that this plan will definitely not succeed. Not to mention the development model of General Comics, even in the previous serialization of this Full Metal Alchemist, the people on the side of Scar and others who joined the protagonist, through interpreting Scar's brother's posthumous work, studied the anti-human alchemy array that is opposite to the human alchemy array. Although the people on the side of Edward, the protagonist, were caught in front of the little man in the flask, although the 5 pillars have gathered, although the time of activation is when the total solar eclipse occurs, but, readers have always believed that the plan of the little man in the flask will never be realized, and there will definitely be loopholes in some links in the future. However, with the serialization of the recent few episodes of Full Metal Alchemist, readers found that it seems that they were really fooled by the Phoenix Court. Because the little man in the flask finally launched the human alchemy during the total solar eclipse, except for the existence of the protagonist's side around it, the souls of the entire country's people were devoured. The plan that had been arranged for many years was finally completed on this day. Of course, the development of the comics was beyond the expectations of many readers, and it also attracted a lot of contempt. This plan was actually successful, which is not scientific at all. What about the key moment? What about the betrayer who suddenly appeared in the middle? However, while the readers cursed secretly, they were also full of expectations. After all, after falling into such a desperate situation, if the protagonist wants to reverse it, the difficulty instantly increased by 1 level. Comics that readers cannot predict the plot are really worth watching. Next, when readers saw the little man in the flask, using the power they had just obtained, began to devour the god of this world, they gradually began to look forward to it. After all, this kind of plot often appears in many comic novels. The existence of the so-called last enemy always enters the brain-dead mode and tries to do something contrary to common sense, but the result is self-defeating. Not only did the goal not achieve, but it also put itself in great trouble, allowing the protagonist to seize the opportunity to counterattack and thus turn defeat into victory. However, something unexpected happened again. The so-called god in Full Metal Alchemist was easily devoured. Seeing the little man in the flask swallowing the god in the comics, he is so powerful that he can easily create a sun, which makes many readers' mouths twitch. Pete, what's the point of this? How can such an opponent be defeated? No matter how strong Edward and others are, even if Edward and others have the title of National Alchemist, in essence, Edward and others are still in the category of human beings, and the opponent can easily create a sun, which is not the level that humans can achieve, right? Could it be that the ending of Full Metal Alchemist is that Edward and other people on the protagonist's side are all destroyed, unable to turn the tide, and let the world usher in a devastating end? This unexpected ending is not alarmist, but a cartoonist named Feng Guangyuan Kyoma has had such a criminal record. However, the reader's worries are unnecessary. The subsequent serialization of Full Metal Alchemist tells the layout of Hohenheim and others, and the protagonist's side enters the counterattack mode. In addition, Scar, who killed the seriously injured president, also launched the anti-human alchemy array in time, successfully expelling the human soul that the little man in the flask had just obtained. It seems that everything has made the protagonist's side, half a foot into the door of victory. However, even if the little man in the flask uses all his strength to imprison the god of the world, he is still so powerful that Edward and others cannot match it. Although the number 1 position of Full Metal Alchemist has not been threatened recently, Yoshida is not happy. Because of his identity as an editor, Yoshida saw the comic manuscript 1 step earlier than other readers, and Takahashi Makoto had already handed the comic of Full Metal Alchemist to Yoshida, which is why Yoshida is not happy. Because the content to be published below is exactly the content of everyone joining forces to fight against the little man in the flask, which makes Yoshida feel the most shocked. In the headquarters, everyone joined forces to attack. Edward and others, who are the main combat force, naturally needless to say, even ordinary soldiers join the battle. The alchemy of endless attack methods is carried out by Edward and others who are responsible for the output, and the surrounding supporting soldiers who only appear in part of the shot are also familiar with the use of machine guns and artillery shells to carry out modern firepower attacks. Although in the comics, these attacks are like child's play to the little man in the flask, and have no effect at all. But as a reader, Yoshida felt the tenacity of human beings from it. Perhaps in the eyes of the little man in the flask, human beings are just existences that can be used as energy at any time, just like ants in the eyes of humans, but even so, every human present has integrated the tenacity of their nature into every attack. After Takahashi Makoto and Lee Binjian performed combined skills, the quality of the comics reached a new level. The contemptuous expression on the face of the little man in the flask, the resolute expression of Edward and others, and even the soldiers who occasionally appeared were the same. That kind of tenacious expression, every stroke, was integrated with strong personal emotions. Although the quality of the comics has improved recently, to this extent, Yoshida was a little surprised. He thought that the quality of the comics had improved before, and thought that it was Takahashi Makoto who did it occasionally, but looking at this episode, Yoshida found that he was too superficial. Whether it is the description of the character's expression or the storyboard of the battle, it is full of an indomitable and tragic atmosphere. This is a decisive battle to the death. This is the last battle. This is the will that Yoshida felt from the comics. After enduring many attacks, the little man in the flask consumed a lot of Philosopher's Stone, and finally couldn't suppress the god in his body, and fell into frenzy mode. Just from the comics, the headquarters square was sunken into a circle, which can be inferred from the severity of the explosion. The people affected by the explosion were directly blown away. And Edward was the most unlucky one among them. The mechanical armor on his right hand was instantly decomposed, and his left arm pierced into the steel pipe and was firmly nailed in the ruins. Watching the little man in the flask step by step towards Edward in the comics, Yoshida's breathing has begun to become rapid. Before, watching everyone unite to fight the enemy with one heart, it was really impressive, but I didn't expect Edward, as the protagonist, to suddenly fall into such a desperate situation. The ups and downs of this plot development made Yoshida's mind full of the next development, and even forgot the responsibilities of the editor in charge. May, I have something to ask you. When the comic turned to Al, there was no abruptness. But looking at Al's lines in the comics, Yoshida suddenly had a bad feeling. Big Brother sacrificed his right arm in exchange for my soul. If so, the opposite is also true. You just need to help me create a channel, can you do it? There is no time, please. I can only ask you for this kind of thing. Just when the little man in the flask walked in front of Edward, 5 darts suddenly appeared on the empty stone wall of Edward's right arm. This is the alchemy formation of the new country girl Jongmei. The camera in the comics shifted again, this time it was Al, whose armor was broken, lying on the ground, and there was also the same formation around him. Just like Edward's surprised expression in the comics, Yoshida, whose heartbeat suddenly accelerated, already understood what was going to happen next. What are you going to do? Stop, hey, Al. Edward seemed to have noticed Al's thoughts and shouted with grief and anger. Although the lines in the comics were only a few words, Yoshida could fully imagine that Edward at this moment was definitely trying to stop Al's behavior with a trembling roar. Defeat it, Big Brother, these were Al's last words. Putting his hands together, Yoshida was not unfamiliar with this gesture. This was the gesture that alchemists used to construct a circle when they launched alchemy after seeing the Gate of Truth. Al refined the soul mark constructed by Edward with blood, and exchanged his soul for his brother Edward's right arm. After this episode, the editorial department's phone will definitely be blown up. After seeing this, Yoshida put down the comic manuscript in his hand, lay on the sofa with his head raised, trying not to let his tears flow out, with a resentful expression on his face. If Takahashi Makoto was here, even if he knew that he was no match for him in terms of force, Yoshida would definitely rush up and fight with Takahashi Makoto. Although Al knew that this was to save his brother's life, when he really faced this cruel fact, Yoshida felt more of an urge to cry in addition to feeling depressed. Hey, has the soul entered? Will he come back to find you, in the world of truth? In front of the skinny Al, a white humanoid creature with only right hand and left foot, with a big mouth, said to Al with a smile. I will come, I will definitely come. Al's face with a protruding hip bone showed a firm smile, and he replied to the truth. I am really looking forward to it. What will he sacrifice? After the right hand disappeared, the face of the truth, where only the mouth can be seen, was full of a teasing smile, and said so. Although he was very anxious to see the development later, Yoshida's eyes were already a little blurred because of Al's behavior. Wiping the corners of his eyes with his sleeves, after a short pause, Yoshida finally suppressed his desire to cry, picked up the comic manuscript again, and continued to read it. Edward, whose right arm was restored, fell into a furious mode because of Al's sacrifice. He kept using alchemy. With the almost cathartic support of the crowd, he made several fatal attacks on the little man in the flask. After every attack, there were calls for support from his companions. Every attack made Yoshida's heart tremble. Go ahead, Edward. Yoshida finally couldn't help it, and shouted along with his companions in the comics. Tears had already flowed down his cheeks without him noticing. Stand up, you low-class bastard. Edward knocked the little man in the flask to the ground with a straight punch, clenched his right fist tightly, and an angry expression on his face. Let me see the level gap between us. The content of this episode ends here. Looking at the last chapter of the comic on the table, Yoshida reached out to take it, but after hesitating, he finally sighed helplessly, retracted his hand, and put the comic on the table. After that, Yoshida fell into a state of meditation, as if he was still savoring the previous content. This comic. Gently wiping the corners of his eyes, after a brief silence, Yoshida exited the meditation state, and an ugly smile appeared on his face. Keep the first position, serialized to the end. It seems that Ah-Cheng did not lie. Maybe, I can definitely do it. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 154. Just as Yoshida expected, after the new issue of Steel was released, a storm of phone calls launched several attacks on the editorial department. 80% of the calls were related to steel refining. Among them, the most talked about thing is about Al using his soul in exchange for Edward's right arm. Many readers are very worried about this plot. The reason for calling the editorial department is nothing more than asking about the result. Edward finally defeated the villain in the flask, and Al was finally rescued. Although he has read the content of the last chapter before, it is impossible for Yoshida to disclose these contents to readers, which involves some confidentiality issues. Of course, Makoto Takahashi will not leak the plot, which Yoshida is very relieved about. In response to the calls from readers, other colleagues in the editorial department who don't know the content can only comfort them with kind words, so that readers can wait for the next chapter with peace of mind. It seems that Phoenix Academy's Fierce Steel can take first place again this time. Yojiro complained to Yoshida unhappily, but Yoshida, although the result is good, this kind of situation happens often. I have wanted to change my job several times. It's so troublesome. Well, this can be regarded as a sign of the popularity of Metal Steel. Haha, Hattori, the sea urchin head, laughed to lighten the atmosphere. This survivor of the phone storm was still trying to explain to the phone. Yoshida said with a shy look on his face, I've also read this episode of Steel, and I'm a little embarrassed to say it, but when I saw the scene where Al sacrificed his soul in order to get Edward's arm back, I couldn't hold it back either, haha. As an editor, you should review comics before they are serialized. Naturally, you should have the ability to deal with problems that may occur after comics are serialized in a timely manner. Editor Aida joined the discussion angrily, his tone full of endless resentment. Now Yoshida, as the editor-in-chief, did not expect such a thing to happen at the beginning. This was a dereliction of duty on his part. Yes, You will know after the next chapter is published. Well, that's it. Yoshida just put down the phone, with a look of pain and happiness on his face. Sure enough, the content of the chapter that made me burst into tears before was also very effective for readers in terms of damage. Regarding Aida's remarks, Yoshida curled his lips in displeasure and complained in a vented manner, "I knew this would happen a long time ago. After all, I have all the manga manuscripts from Steel to its completion." The following content is. When several colleagues heard this, their eyes lit up, and they all stared at Yoshida, with curious expressions on their faces. The expectant eyes also possess absolute lethality. Especially when he saw several grown men trying to open their eyes wide, with curiosity shining in them, Yoshida instantly felt a chill. Although being cute is a way to survive, it may not be suitable for everyone, especially editors who have passed their 30s. Well, I'm going to discuss with Cheng about the ending. Yoshida used a poor excuse to activate his escape skills and got rid of the disgusting uncle's offensive in time. When Yoshida came to Takahashi Makoto's house, he saw Takahashi Makoto sitting cross-legged on the ground with a huge bowl full of wine in front of him. He was talking to someone on the phone. From time to time, he raised his head with a smile on his face. "Take a few sips from the giant bowl." I said, "Cheng, what are you doing?" The group came back from the surprise, their mouths twitched wildly, and they looked at Makoto Takahashi with a black look on their face. "It can't be that you are in the middle of an association or something." Call. There is still the content of the last chapter. Isn't it too early to start preparing for the wedding with peace of mind now? Ignoring Yoshida's question, Takahashi Makoto put down the bowl, with a look on his face that reminded Yoshida the smile of some black history. "Brother Muse, have you ever thought about it? If the content of the last chapter does not win the first place, I thought I was in front of the door of hope, but after opening the door, I found that we'll fall into the abyss of despair. Such contrasting cuteness is indeed the most loving existence." It turns out I was talking to Lee Byung-yin. Yoshida was a little surprised this time. At first, I thought that Takahashi Makoto was just talking to himself on the phone as usual, but now, staring at the darkening expression on Takahashi Makoto's face, Yoshida helplessly shook his head. He shook his head. Although he said he didn't care, he was still a little bit concerned about Lee Byung-yin's departure. The sixth sense sent a warning of danger. Yoshida, who followed his body's intuition, squatted down without hesitation. A wave of coldness passed through Yoshida's head dangerously and dangerously. The loud noise from behind made him turn around and look back. Yoshida swallowed unconsciously. The wooden sword pierced into the wall, and the half of the sword that kept shaking was obviously a wooden sword that didn't look sharp at all. Yoshida, who had just had a brush with death, clearly understood that if his reaction had been slower, something would have definitely happened. Well, human life is a matter of great importance. "Hey! Did you miss Makoto?" Takahashi muttered in a low voice, slowly lowered his right hand, and after taking a big sip of wine, a dangerous smile appeared on his face. "My beloved cat, it seems your reaction ability has indeed improved a lot after a period of practice." "Cheng, do you want to kill me?" The frightened Yoshida instantly entered Spartan roaring mode. "Don't think I didn't hear what you just said." "My beloved cat, I want to kill you, so what?" Makoto Takahashi admitted with no shame. "You were so immersed in your own inner world that you didn't even notice that I was on the phone." "Humph. You must be slandering me in your heart." "Hee hee, my dependent cat, I wonder if you, who will be tortured next, will regret that you subconsciously dodged at that time, and regret that you did not choose death in time." "Cheng, don't be so cruel and scary. You wouldn't do that at all." Yoshida launched a scornful taunt, with an expression of "hit me" on his face, staring at Makoto Takahashi provocatively, and the two fell into the confrontation stage. After a long time, Yoshida couldn't bear the pressure at first, and spread his hands helplessly. "Okay Cheng, Let's stop this boring game. Now let's talk about the content of the last chapter of Steel. Is there anything else to discuss? Makoto Takahashi heard Yoshida mention Steel, and the look on his face became even more unhappy. He stood up and walked to the wall, taking the wooden sword back into his hand. The position called number 1, will be unshakable. Before the summer comes, steel refining will become a gorgeous firework, and its dazzling and charming light will be engraved in the soul of mankind. And I, the Phoenix Academy, will also take this opportunity to awakening the third sealed sword of the monster era, haha, drink ha 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 ha. After many readers have been waiting with tears in their eyes, the last chapter of Steel Refining has finally been published. After Al banished his soul, in order to completely defeat the villain in the flask, Greed, the incarnation of greed, took the opportunity of being devoured to complete the most powerful move of a domineering pure man sacrifice, and before dying, the villain in the flask was charred all over and helped his teammate Edward take down the head. Many readers couldn't help but feel sad about this result. Not to mention Al, who had already left this world, and Glid, who finally understood what he had been pursuing, and what he had to do to kill the villain in the flask. The price is really too high. The comic series does not end here, but turns to the armor left by Al. This is what readers are most concerned about. After all, Al told Truth before that his brother Edward will definitely come here and take him back. But, what will Edward have to pay? It is impossible to resurrect the dead. The two Edward brothers paid a heavy price for this. This is also the beginning of the entire comic. Facing Al's already tattered armor, Edward's teammates proposed to use the remaining Philosopher's Stone in exchange for Al's soul, but Edward rejected it. Hohenheim, who later appeared as a loving father, also made the same suggestion, hoping that Edward would use his last piece of the Philosopher's Stone to exchange for Al. Idiot, how could such a thing be done? It's our own fault that our brothers lost their bodies. To regain Al's body, you must not use other people's lives. Haven't I said it many times? Besides, why do I need you? Risk your life. As many readers expected, Edward rejected Hohenheim's proposal without hesitation, and at the same time he severely reprimanded his father. Although readers had previously known that Edward would refuse such a proposal, seeing Edward refuse without hesitation in the comics slowly relaxed their hearts, especially Al fans who have always been supporters. Because if Edward really exchanged Hohenheim's life for Al's body, according to Al's character, he would definitely have self-blame and pain accompanying him for the rest of his life. Because I am a father, Hohenheim's answer made Edward's expression freeze instantly. When readers saw this, they were stunned at first, and then were captured by Hohenheim's strong fatherly love. It's not a question of need or reason, because you are my most important family, so I hope you can be happy. The reason why your body is like this, I am also responsible for you letting it go. I'm sorry, I have already lived. It's been long enough. At the last moment, let me do the most important thing that is consistent with my fatherhood. What stupid words are you talking about, damn dad? Don't say such things again, or I will beat you up. In the comics, Edward looked so arrogant with tears streaming down his face, but this time the readers who watched it couldn't laugh at all, because many people's eyes had begun to blur. This family scene between father and son is no less impressive than the previous scene where Al sacrificed himself in exchange for Edward's arm. In the comics, Edward keeps thinking of ways. Outside the comics, readers are also thinking about a way to get Al back without sacrificing anyone. Is this really possible? However, as in the comics, Edward began to draw human bodies on the ground to form formations. Many readers became a little confused. Could Edward, who was at a loss just now, have already thought of a way? Of course, many readers are a little worried that Edward will be like Al, sacrificing himself in exchange for his brother Al. I'm going to go. Edward stood in the middle of the alchemy formation, clasping his hands together, with a confident smile on his face. Full Metal Alchemist, The Final Refinement. Edward's statement seemed to have an ominous premonition, and anxious readers quickly opened the next page of the comic manuscript. Countless readers have only one thought in common: don't do anything stupid, Edward. Edward stood in front of a heavy door. The delicate stripes on the door were full of mystery in every stroke. Although readers can recognize at a glance that this is the door of truth, they still can't help but admire this delicate painting. Hey, come and take your brother Al back. But how do you take someone away? What's the price? Do you have to sacrifice your body? Isn't the price here? It's very huge. Edward showed a smile on his face and pointed to the door behind him. This is my door of truth, in other words, how you use it is mine. Freedom. Did I say it wrong? Shock. Shocking. Big surprise. Regarding Edward's choice, many readers, like Truth in the comics, were briefly surprised and then couldn't help but marvel. Edward actually thought of this method. Many readers were very excited. After all, they had never guessed that the price Edward chose to pay would be his ability to use alchemy. Indeed, behind this door, there is all the knowledge of alchemy, but that's why we are so at the mercy of others. Because we saw some truth, we thought everything can be solved with alchemy, but at that time wrong, it's just arrogance. There's no such thing as degeneration. I will die like an ordinary person from the beginning. I can't even save the little girl who was turned into a synthetic beast after filing a case. She's a tiny human being. Even if there is no alchemy, everyone is still here. Edward smiled, clasped his hands, broke his door of truth into pieces, and then, as readers saw, took Al back. Regarding this result, although readers are a little regretful that Edward will not be able to use alchemy from now on, but as the Edward brothers insisted, no one's life was sacrificed. Although this ending seems a bit regretful, it is definitely in line with most of the readers' thoughts. So when they saw in the comics that the two brothers returned to their hometown and were hugged by Wenli, who was crying with joy, many readers couldn't help but shed tears. Lessons that are not accompanied by pain are meaningless. Because if people don't sacrifice something, they can't get anything. But after enduring this kind of pain and overcoming it, people will gain nothing. A tough heart of things. Yes, a tough heart of steel. As the final words of Steel, it naturally fits the theme of the entire comic. Although there are many touching things in the comic, different readers have different understandings. However, after reading this passage, every reader will unconsciously think of the plot of Steel and fall into memories. In the mode. On the day that Shonen Jump released the final chapter of Steel, Makoto Takahashi received calls from several manga artists. Congratulations on the completion of Steel. Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Phoenix Academy. It's very exciting. Eiji Niizuma still has the same character. If you like it, you will say it directly, and if you want to challenge it, you will not shy away. Although the timing is unlucky this time, I will definitely defeat you next time, Phoenix Academy teacher. Hey. Aiken, you did a good job this time. I read the content of the last episode, although I'm not willing to give in, I still think it's yours in the first place. The caller this time was the hard-spoken and soft-hearted Fusion. Brother, that arrogant tone is really cute. But it's just this time, next time my new comics will definitely defeat you. Congratulations on completing Steel, Makoto Takahashi. As if she was afraid of the pollution of the middle school radio waves, the well-educated Miss Kang Shuhong just said a simple greeting and hung up the phone. As for the little sea otter, I planned to come to the door in person to congratulate him, but I was caught by Yoshida before I even went out and dragged him back directly. At the same time, I also confiscated my mobile phone and other props that can communicate with the outside world. This is a few days later, I came to collect the manga manuscript. When Yoshida was conveying his congratulations to the little sea otter, he accidentally let slip something. I know, You guys want to say congratulations on the ending, right? Opening the door slightly, looking at the Yachin Mumenjai duo outside the door, Takahashi Makoto revealed half of his face, directly pointing out the two of them. Purpose, so is it okay now? I am entering the critical moment of my cultivation. Have you seen the thunder clouds in the sky? This is a serious thunderstorm in our Phoenix Academy. If you don't want to be dragged down, please leave quickly. Speaking of which, after the good-hearted Takahashi Makoto entertained him for a while, Ajo and Mumenjai looked at the sky in confusion. Will thunderclouds appear in this hot sunny day? After closing the door, the phone on the table kept vibrating. Looking at the name displayed on the phone, Makoto Takahashi smiled on his face. It's me, Makoto Takahashi said slowly to the person on the other side of the phone. Well, yes, it's over. So, there are no regrets now, right? This time the other person on the phone seemed to be in a state of aphasia, without any words to respond. Have you fallen into a state of silence? A smile appeared on Takahashi Makoto's face. Oh, it seems that you have distracting thoughts? No, since you have chosen, you can't regret it. Whatever you want to get, just do it. Something has to give, so you understand, that's what it's called. Is it an equivalent exchange? The person on the other side of the phone sighed. I'm grateful to you for taking care of me all this time, Chang. The same is true here, my friend. 5,000 achievement achieved. This is the love I have given to Full Metal Alchemist, so it's okay to update alone, right? By the way, I have to work overtime tomorrow, which is really unfortunate. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 155. For the ending of Full Metal Alchemist, except for a few readers who are resentful, most readers are quite satisfied. Because of dissatisfaction with reality, they pursue the perfection of the fantasy world. However, after the perfect fantasy world appears, because it is too perfect, it produces unreal resistance, and gradually derives disgust and hate. So human beings are a very contradictory creature. Although the ending of Full Metal Alchemist is a happy ending, such an ending is accompanied by certain regrets and imperfections. Grid, who abandoned darkness and turned to light, died in the last battle. Uncle Hohenheim also died because of the exhaustion of the Philosopher's Stone. Even Edward, the protagonist, successfully rescued his brother Al at the end, but still could not get back his lost left leg. So behind the seemingly beautiful ending, there is also the cruelty of reality. Perhaps it is because of this that it gives readers a different feeling. Although the ending is good, this sense of reality close to reality is the reason for the success of Full Metal Alchemist. So there was no surprise that the last episode of Full Metal Alchemist successfully won the first place and ended with a perfect ending. After the completion of Full Metal Alchemist, Takahashi Makoto didn't care about the social evaluation and the status in the readers' hearts. So when Yoshida saw the good reviews in the newspaper and cheered with excitement, Takahashi Makoto's reaction was quite cold. Google searched "Can Ah Chang, Full Metal Alchemist has achieved such results, aren't you happy?" Yoshida noticed Takahashi Makoto's indifference. Full Metal Alchemist has maintained the first place since the episode The Promised Day until the end, and the editor was surprised by this. I say, Ah Chang, can you at least have some reaction? Full Metal Alchemist is a manga you created, and it has achieved such results. So what's there to be happy about? Takahashi Makoto put down his brush, turned his head and looked at Yoshida, and asked with a puzzled look, since the manga has been completed, don't think about the result. Your idea is really weird, my cat. It's you who are weird, aren't you? Yoshida complained back without hesitation, with a look of disappointment on his face, and scolded Takahashi Makoto. As a cartoonist, do you have such an attitude towards your finished comics? At least you should care about the comics. My beloved cat, did you make a mistake? Takahashi Makoto looked at Yoshida with a look of grief. I am Hao Winkuma, a crazy cartoonist. There is no need to consider what the result will be after the comics are finished. Instead of spending time thinking about these things, you might as well hurry up and draw comics. That's not what you said before. Although Takahashi Makoto was right, which made Yoshida feel that he couldn't refute it, but what was the matter with this abnormal sense of disobedience? By the way, Chen, did you encounter something? Ah, since you already know, I won't hide it anymore. Takahashi Chen sighed and went into nostalgia mode. That's right, it was the summer when I was 8 years old. It happened more than 10 years ago, and you still remember it clearly. You've worked so hard. Just at the beginning, Yoshida interrupted Takahashi Chen's speech without any hesitation. Don't always use this excuse. Many of the things you said before happened in the summer when you were 8 years old. By the way, the summer when you were 8 years old, there were 200 hours a day, right? What, my beloved cat, you know it very well. Takahashi Chen was stunned at first, then stared at Yoshida with suspicion. At that time, I felt someone was spying on me. It seems that it was not an illusion. Could it be? Don't change the subject. I don't understand what this guy is thinking. Yoshida looked at Takahashi Makoto with an innocent face, resisted the urge to hit him, and tried to calm down the anger in his heart. Ah Chen, what are you thinking about? How can we make this world return to chaos? After giving a serious answer, ignoring Yoshida's mouth twitching wildly, Takahashi Makoto, who was in a frenzy, continued to talk about his great dream, but this goal is difficult to achieve. So I plan to brainwash readers through comics, develop my followers, and after accumulating strength, I will start a war to destroy the world. When humans die to the point of extinction, this planet has been almost destroyed. At that time, Gaia Loli, as the consciousness of the earth, will naturally kneel at my feet and bow down to save the fate of the world's destruction. At that time, I will become the king of mankind and the god of the new world, and of course I can make this world return to chaos. Ha ha ha. Is this the purpose of your drawing comics? Yoshida tried to get Takahashi Makoto to exit the middle school state and go back to the topic they talked about before. Of course not. My beloved cat, how could you have such a superficial idea? Takahashi Makoto looked at Yoshida with contempt. You believe everything I say, and hold on to this foolish naivete. You will definitely die without a burial place in your future life. Can you beat this Chuyunibu kid? Yoshida's mouth twitched wildly, and his face became extremely gloomy. Now that the comic is over, all the achievements and honors, the infamy and resentment that have been carried can be discarded. Those who are still obsessed with the past will never be able to open up the future. The profession of cartoonist is just like Malio. You can only keep moving forward in order to save the princess, and you are not allowed to stop at the critical moment. Once you miss the mushrooms and gold coins, if you want to start over, you can only choose to commit suicide and start over. Although this sounds reasonable, but, speaking of a stay-at-home profession like a cartoonist, and a plumber who drills holes everywhere to save the princess, do the two really have something in common? Yoshida couldn't help but want to complain. Aiken Mumenjai chose to become a cartoonist because of the agreement he made with the voice actor girl. If you want to realize each other's dreams, you must keep working hard. The silver-haired guy chose to become a cartoonist because he has ambition. He wanted to launch a coup and change the publication mode of Shonen Jump. The king of Black Flame chose to become a cartoonist because he thought drawing comics was very interesting, but this kind of opponent with pure emotions is the most difficult existence to deal with. Ignoring Yoshida's expression of ready to complain, Takahashi Makoto continued to talk to himself. Little sea otter, this simple guy, I remember he seemed to have told me before that he became a cartoonist because... What about you, Chen? After hearing Makoto Takahashi mention someone's name, Yoshida looked extremely unnatural and deliberately changed the subject. My familiar cat, that's a good question. Makoto Takahashi looked proud, which made Yoshida want to cover his ears, but as a familiar cat, he also inherited the curiosity that cats have. I didn't realize it before, but after the end of Steel, I figured out why I chose to evolve into a mad cartoonist and the Phoenix Academy's ferocious truth. Evolution. Regarding Makoto Takahashi's remarks, Yashida has a lot of black lines in his head. That's for the pursuit of supreme pleasure. Makoto Takahashi's happy face gave Yashida a chill. My beloved cat, think about it. The cartoonist who has been drawing inspirational cartoons, and has always been regarded by readers as the cartoonist who redeems the desperate life, suddenly one day transformed into a dark and depressing cartoonist, drawing the comics published make readers so sad that they want to stop but can't. In the end, they can only fall into the abyss of darkness and despair. Tisk tisk tisk. This huge contrast between before and after, as the creator of everything, well, what a joy it was. Is this the reason why you chose to become a manga artist? Yashida seemed to be thinking of Makoto Takahashi's dark manga, and his words began to stutter. Staring at Makoto Takahashi, who looked expectant, Yashida had already felt inexplicable worry. Now Makoto Takahashi is no longer simply a Chuyunibu, but a Chuyunibu who has embarked on a sinister path. By the way, my familiar cat, have you chosen the new contractor? Makoto Takahashi brushed aside the manga manuscript on the table with an expectant look on his face. Didn't you tell me on the phone before? Is the assistant special this time? Is it an alien or a person with superpowers? Speaking of this, Yashida's face showed some hesitation, and the instinct of the family cat was shouting a warning. If that man cooperates with Takahashi Makoto, something terrible will definitely happen in the future. But looking at the expectant look on Makoto Takahashi's face, Yashida ignored his instinctive warning and gritted his teeth. That assistant's name is Jinghe River. Jinghe? I seem to have heard of this name somewhere. During the battle with the King of Black Flame, it seems that, among the humans stored in the brain, there seems to be no face shape corresponding to this name. Gao Qiaocheng frowned and complained unhappily, hey, the human body is really unusable. Don't you remember what happened a few years ago? With such a body, it is still too difficult to challenge Gaia Lolita, a bit reluctant. I will bring you the information about Jinghe River tomorrow. After all, Yashida had already said it, but he did not hide anything anymore. But this assistant has a special personality. Special? Makoto Takahashi's eyes lit up when he heard this. Is it the legendary one who serves as the container to seal the Demon King of Destruction? Well, because he has to bear the pain caused by the seal all the time, he has derived multiple personality. Such rare abilities are really rare. Chen, your brainstorming ability is really excellent. It was obviously a compliment, but listening to the tone of Yashida's words, Takahashi Makoto felt ridiculed. Have you thought about the next comic? You said before that you would serialize 3 comics at the same time, and after Steel ends with such results, we are all looking forward to your 3rd comic. The next comic. Makoto Takahashi pondered for a moment, but did not give a clear answer. Let's first see how the legendary Jinghe River adapts to the comic I conceived. I am very sorry to inform all readers that due to a business trip to the imperial capital tomorrow, updates may be interrupted for a few days. So don't think that you have entered the palace just because you stopped updating for a few days. Well, if everything goes well, I will probably be able to go home next Wednesday night. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 156. Yashida was very efficient. He handed over the relevant information about Shizukawa to Makoto Takahashi early the next morning. Hey, my cat, this is Shizukawa's work, right? Looking at the comic manuscript attached to the information, Makoto Takahashi showed an expectant look on his face. Well, Shizukawa has submitted a manuscript to Shonen Jump before, and this is the submitted work slant book, Seeing that Makoto Takahashi had already started to look through the comic manuscript in his hand, Yoshida showed a worried expression on his face. He wanted to interrupt Makoto Takahashi several times to look through the comic manuscript, but he finally held back. Tisk tisk tisk, this work is great. Makoto Takahashi put down the last page of the comic manuscript and looked at Yoshida with curiosity. This work should not be published, right? Although I don't usually read Shonen Jump, such a dark work, like my previous comic, should not be published in Shonen Jump, right? That's right. Yoshida naturally understood the implication of Makoto Takahashi, especially when he recalled Makoto Takahashi's brutal speech yesterday. Yoshida still has lingering fears. This work cannot be published in Shonen Jump because the story and style are too dark, but the special judge, Mr. Nazuma, gave a very high evaluation to this comic. Oh, by the way, I remember that when this happened, you, Chen, seemed to have gone abroad. The comics of the cartoonist will subconsciously express the cartoonist's thoughts. From this comic, I feel it. The breath of darkness and despair, as well as hatred and disgust for this world. Takahashi Makoto showed an expectant smile on his face. This guy named Jinghe River seems to be an interesting existence. My beloved cat, the assistant has been decided, it is Jinghe River. No problem. Then I will bring Jinghe River to you in the afternoon. It's settled. Yoshida was not surprised at all by Takahashi Makoto's decision, but made arrangements quickly. Oh, it seems there are many unspeakable little secrets behind it. Seeing Yoshida hurriedly leaving, Takahashi Makoto showed an expectant look on his face. This guy named Shizukawa has already reached the strength of a serialized cartoonist, but he still wants to be an assistant, plus my cat's eager reaction this time. Is everything really the organization's plan? Humph, arranging informants is such a cliché method. Are you looking down on me, Phoenix Court Kilma? After reading Shizukawa's work, Takahashi Makoto had already noticed something was wrong. Although the style of slanting book is too dark and depressing, both the style and the plot construction have reached the level that can be serialized. People who can draw such works actually go to be assistants to other cartoonists. People who do this are mostly people from the organization. That guy, Chen, shouldn't have noticed it. Yoshida, who left Takahashi Makoto's house quickly because of his guilty conscience, showed a worried look on his face. Although the editor-in-chief's original plan was to let Jinghe River and Chen have more contact, but, why do I feel so uneasy? Takahashi Makoto was right. The reason why Jinghe River was arranged to be with Takahashi Makoto was the editor-in-chief's intention. However, it was not to supervise Takahashi Makoto, but to let Jinghe River become a manga artist who can stand on his own through more contact with Takahashi Makoto. It's not that Jinghe River doesn't have this talent, but because Jinghe River, because of his long-term self-isolation, is extremely bad at interpersonal relationships and lacks stress resistance. Before he entered the serialization, he was worried that he might not be able to cope with the pressure of weekly serialization in the future, so he gave up the opportunity to serialize on his own. The editor-in-chief had also asked his editors to patiently persuade Jinghe River, but the effect was minimal. At that time, Yamakyo, who was Jinghe River's editor, made a suggestion to the editor-in-chief, that is, to let Jinghe River go to different manga artists as an assistant to learn for a period of time, observe how other manga artists work, and overcome their own weaknesses. Then, that's what happened before. As expected by the editor-in-chief, after seeing Shizukawa's comic manuscript slant book, he will definitely choose Shizukawa as his assistant. When Yoshida brought Shizukawa to Takahashi Makoto's house, Takahashi Makoto was drawing comics. Unlike Yoshida, who was familiar with the place, Shizukawa, who had just arrived, seemed quite reserved. Even before Takahashi Makoto took the initiative to speak, he just stood quietly by the door, not daring to make any sound. According to this situation, if Takahashi Makoto draws comics for 3 or 5 hours, Shizukawa will probably remain silent for the same amount of time, right? In the sound of Yoshida's cough, Takahashi Makoto, who put down his brush and turned into observation mode, curled his lips unhappily. Just like in the photo, Shizukawa is a black-haired man with glasses, but compared to the photo, he is much more handsome in person. And this height that needs to be looked up to. If this guy has money in the future, he will definitely be tall, rich, and handsome, for sure. Just like Takahashi Makoto, who was looking at himself, Shizukawa also began to look at Takahashi Makoto. Just like the rumors, the cartoonist Haoru Kuma always wears a white coat as a researcher's exclusive equipment, and an eye patch on his face, covering his left eye, which is rumored to be blind. But looking at the strange posture of Takahashi Makoto squatting on the chair, coupled with the brush spinning in his hand, is this guy really a cartoonist instead of a scientist? Jinghe was full of doubts. Well, this is Makoto Takahashi, the manga artist Hohoin Kuma. Shizuka-kun, I believe you have seen it too. Yoshida acted as a temporary introduction person, and when he was about to enter the normal introduction mode, Shizuka suddenly spoke. Got it. I like your DN and Higurashi, but I don't like your style. After Shizuka said only one sentence, he looked at Makoto Takahashi blankly and did not continue. Reasons for liking it, reasons for hating it, nothing was said. Well, I like your Zion-ben very much. Makoto Takahashi showed an expectant smile on his face, and pulled out a manga manuscript from the drawer of his desk. So, what do you think of this manga? Well, give me a simple answer, do you like it or hate it? Jinghe stepped forward timidly, took the manga manuscript from Makoto Takahashi's hand with some hesitation, and slowly flipped through it. Yoshida, who was curious on the side, stretched his head and looked at the name of the comic. His face was suddenly filled with black lines. He opened his mouth to say something, but Makoto Takahashi shook his head and stopped him. I like it. I can also draw with this style, but with this level of content. Jinghe hesitated for a moment, then shook his head in despair. I can't draw it. Well, the newcomers this time are very good. Makoto Takahashi turned to look at Yoshida, with a strange smile on his face. Young man, do you want the world to return to chaos? Do you want the world to be filled with hatred and despair? Do you want to truly become a world-destroying being? Come and sign a contract with me. I will act as a guide to bring out the dark power in your heart. And as a price, you only need to sign this contract. Looking at the smile on Makoto Takahashi's face and the paper shaking in his hand, Yoshida suddenly began to have endless worries about the editor-in-chief's decision to let Shizuka come to study with Makoto Takahashi. In the end, Shizukawa did not sign the so-called contract, but still became Makoto Takahashi's assistant, and the comic he was responsible for was the third yokai manga that Makoto Takahashi was about to submit to the serialization meeting. The plot of the story is basically like this: after sending Yoshida away, Takahashi Makoto roughly told Shizuka the content of the third comic, and at the same time pulled out the comic manuscript from the table. This is the main character in the comic. This kind of character is a bit. Looking at the comic manuscript in his hand, Jinghe showed a surprised look on his face. Because he had previously learned that he might become the assistant of the Phoenix Academy's murderer, Jinghe deliberately read the comics of the Phoenix Academy's murderer carefully. From the very beginning of DN to the current style, the comics serialized by Phoenix Academy murderer, let's not discuss the issue of painting style, but just in terms of character design, they all have a kind of delicate beauty. But, the comic manuscript in my hand is neither delicate nor beautiful, and the characters even look a little rough and wild. If the comic manuscript being serialized is of high definition quality, then the comic manuscript in hand can only be regarded as realistic standard definition picture quality at best. Can a comic of this caliber be serialized in Shonen Jump? Jinghe was a little suspicious, whether Takahashi Makoto mistakenly mistook the storyboard draft for a manga draft. Young man, Don't be blinded by the rough appearance. Close your eyes and look with your inner eye, you will see a different world. Makoto Takahashi seemed to see the confusion in Jinghee's eyes, just like the NPC, he immediately gave the key tip. But comics, it seems like the characters can be drawn in more detail. No, this proposal is rejected. Makoto Takahashi shook his head resolutely, because there will be many close-ups of human beings being tortured and killed in comics. If the drawings are very detailed, Commander, it is not easy to fool him. Although I'm also looking forward to showing the direct scenes of human beings being time-shared through delicate paintings, but I guess by that time, the Commander will come to my door in person and give me a philosophical education. Let's not talk about this for now. What do you think of the plot of the comic? Sample. The beginning of the story feels a bit outdated. This setting has appeared many times, so it sounds a bit cliché. Shizukawa recalled the plot of the story told by Makoto Takahashi before, and said it unceremoniously. But I like this story very much. Especially the setting of the monster changing at the end. Now that you've decided, let's start working. Makoto Takahashi handed the manga manuscript on the table to Shizuo. Except for the 12 pages I have completed before, I will leave the rest to you. By the way, no need to come tomorrow, I'm going to recruit teammates to kill monsters. Huh? Recruit teammates to spawn monsters. A trace of curiosity flashed in Jinghee's eyes. Teacher, do you like playing games like me? My ID on the internet is. I've always been a standalone player. Makoto Takahashi looked at the somewhat disappointed Jinghee River. In order to win over him, he tried to send out a team invitation. Tomorrow, I will recruit housekeepers and witches, and prepare to kill the slime elite boss. You, want to go together? Hey, when you readers see this update, a certain cat has already embarked on a journey. If everything goes well, we will be back next Wednesday and resume updating. I sincerely apologize again for the inconvenience caused to you readers, /U003E, /U003C. I hope there are PCS in the association's stronghold. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Email. Chapter 157. Flight delays are a test of physical and mental suffering for both passengers on the plane and those waiting to be picked up. So when Rina and others' flight arrived, Takahashi Makoto, who had been waiting at the airport, had lost his patience and did not show up at the agreed location as he said on the phone. See, Ryoko, the target of this assassination is the white-haired man with glasses in a suit. Don't show a puzzled expression, and don't be fooled by the other party's human disguise. That's right, that look is not the guy's real body, but just temporarily disguised as a human. Takahashi Makoto stood in the aisle on the second floor, leaned out half of his body to peek for a moment, gnashed his teeth and pointed at Ogata Eiji, saying with resentment, "That's right, the slime elite leader who transformed into a human, although the combat power of the real body is only 5 to 10, but with the disguise, he can cruelly perform the alienation plan. This is the most terrifying part of it. That, although I usually play games at home, although I don't know who the man you are talking about is, but..." Jinghee River looked at him with some doubts. "Makoto Takahashi, that girl wearing sunglasses should be Princess Rina Ogata, right? She's the one following the man you mentioned." "What? How do you know?" Makoto Takahashi looked at Shizuru with surprise. After thinking for a moment, his face became gloomy. He took out his cell phone from his white coat pocket and complained in a voice full of anger and pain, "It was me, the guy who just joined the association betrayed. That's right, it was the Ryoko who just passed the trial. In order to prevent him from revealing the information of the association to the organization, the third apostle suggested to kill him immediately." "What? At this time, you still have to apply to the leader before making a decision? Don't be kidding. It's Princess Rina." Shizuru murmured in a low voice, completely ignoring Makoto Takahashi's delusional words. With the popularity of Rebellion before, the staff involved in Rebellion have gradually become well known. As the singer of most of the songs in Rebellion, Rina Ogata has also become the goddess in the hearts of many otakus with her beautiful voice and excellent appearance. Although he usually hates being called an otaku, Shizukawa is indeed an otaku. Shizukawa really likes the music of the animation Rebellion. Humans will be interested in what they like, and Shizukawa is the same. The reason why he can recognize Rina wearing sunglasses at a glance is that there is no doubt that Shizukawa is naturally a fan of Rina. Among Rina Ogata's group, a man dressed like a butler in a black tuxedo seemed to have noticed it and stopped, with a charming smile on his face, looking at the place where Makoto Takahashi and Shizukawa were. Unlike Makoto Takahashi, who was still immersed in the roaring communication, Shizukawa subconsciously hid back, whether because of his own personality or because of the guilty conscience after being discovered by secretly peeping. Tisk. Have you been discovered? Takahashi Makoto put down his phone and looked at Jinghe River with sympathy, his tone full of annoyance. I forgot Sebastian's hidden ability can detect all peepers. Ah-Cheng, you know. Jinghe River paused in surprise, looking at Takahashi Makoto with some surprise. Princess Rina. Let's not talk about this for now, Ryoko. Takahashi Makoto sighed, his face full of determination. I forgot Sebastian's special ability, it was my mistake. Now there is no doubt that the ambush is a surprise attack, so, repeating Takahashi Makoto's words, Jinghe River's face became a little flustered. His intuition told him not to ask too many questions and to stay away from Takahashi Makoto as much as possible, but his body took actions that rejected his intuition. If I can't destroy the slime elite leader, please inherit my will and let the Red Lotus's fire ignite the whole world. Takahashi Makoto said so, and rushed directly from the corner of the hiding place, and his target was Ogata Ag, who had stopped. Bankai. The great method of disintegrating the demons and burning them together. As Jinghe covered his twitching mouth and watched, the existence read as How Winkuma and written as Takahashi Makoto, with the determination to die, passed by at a very fast speed, and then stepped on a banana peel thrown by a smiling man, fell in a very gorgeous posture, and with the power provided by the smooth floor, slid directly in front of Rina and her group. Hiss, it must be painful. The loud noise when the body touched the floor, and the friction sound afterwards, the humans who witnessed all this, with twitching mouth corners and gloating eyes, resonated because of the same thoughts. Makoto, are you okay now? At Takahashi Makoto's house, Rina looked at Takahashi Makoto lying on his back on the sofa, unable to fight, and her face was heartbroken. Especially when she saw the many scratches on Takahashi Makoto's body, Rina wiped them with a towel and asked worriedly, "You've got a lot of scratches, it must be painful." "Humph. You deserve it." Ogata Ag sat on the edge of the sofa, looking at Takahashi Makoto with a mocking expression. He wanted to say a few more words, but after seeing his sister's hostile eyes, he snorted unhappily, turned his head away, and uttered two words through gritted teeth, "You deserve it." "Sebastian, this is the barrier I set up, right? Why does a strange creature like slime appear?" Takahashi Makoto also pouted his lips in dissatisfaction, complaining to Sebastian, who was smiling, "Even if it has evolved into an elite leader, a slime is still a slime after all, and it should not be qualified to enter this barrier." Sebastian did not make any explanation for Takahashi Makoto's questioning, but just smiled and brewed black tea for everyone, and then stood aside quietly, intending to be a quiet handsome man. "Who is this?" Looking at Jinghe River, who was a little confused, Ogata Ag pushed his glasses and asked curiously. "My magic name is Ryoko, I'm good at dark ghost arts and ninjutsu, so I can't tell you my real name. As my top warrior, don't even think about recruiting a slime elite leader." Takahashi Makoto ignored Ogata Ag's face, turned to look at Rina, who was busy, and asked in confusion, "Have you finished your training?" "Which Rina?" The purpose of coming back this time is all because of you, little devil. Ogata Ag spoke before Rina, with a tangled expression on his face. The second animation of your manga rebellion has been basically completed. Rina came back this time mainly because of your previous contract with Taigasa, which asked Rina to sing the songs in it. Really, it's all because of you. Rina's study progress has been delayed a lot. Huh? Rina looked at Ogata Ag in surprise, with a puzzled look on her face. Didn't you say this before? Didn't you say that this time, I would take the opportunity of recording a new song to release a new album at the same time? Didn't you laugh at that time and said that Makoto created this opportunity at the right time? Humph. For things that cannot be changed, I will naturally make the most of them as much as possible. Ogata Ag looked at Takahashi Makoto, who was resting, and turned his head away unhappily, but the tone of his voice. You are a grown man, what a tsundere you are. It's disgusting. The energy of complaining instantly reached the maximum, and Takahashi Makoto seemed to be able to transform. But for Takahashi Makoto, who pursues infinite output, this level is not enough. I said slime. And Jinghe River, who had nothing to do and couldn't get a word in, had to pick up the comic manuscript on the table and get into work. Well, in fact, Jinghe River's too weak communication ability and presence in the previous introduction have been completely burned out. He is very focused. Once he starts drawing comics, he will be completely absorbed in it. This is the advantage of Jinghe River. Although his current job is just to draw the background of comics, paste pictures and other simple tasks, Jinghe River still does it very seriously, completely ignoring the two people who are arguing on the side. For this comic, both the name and the plot setting are very old-fashioned, and the painting style is wild, to put it nicely, and rough, to put it bluntly. Let's not talk about the exquisite and delicate painting style of the later period of Full Metal Alchemist. Even the currently serialized Inuyasha and Nura are far better than this comic. Why did this comic choose such a style? Puzzled, looking up at the blindfolded Takahashi Makoto, Jinghe River looked very confused. Don't look at me like that, confused boy. If you want to know, sign a contract with me first. Noticing Jinghe's expression, Makoto Takahashi stopped fighting with Eiji Ogata, and a strange smile appeared on his face. Well, maybe you will understand in the future. The reason why you haven't understood it now is because you are not devout enough in my faith, and your love for this comic is not deep enough. Faith is not devout enough, love is not deep enough. Jinghe, with a twitching mouth, lowered his head and continued to draw comics, no longer pinning the hope of explanation on Makoto Takahashi. What idiot would sign a contract like that? A bunch of garbled characters composed of completely incomprehensible symbols. Could it be the existence of elementary school students' casual graffiti? Don't think that after registering, you can bully my sister at will. Let Rina live at your place tonight. Don't even think about such a thing. Jinghe, who gradually entered the state of forgetting both the self and the world, was suddenly awakened by the roar of Eiji Ogata. Jinghe stopped the brush in his hand because he was frightened. When I looked up, I saw Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Ogata in a tense confrontation. Rather than a confrontation, it was more like Eiji Ogata, who was blushing, staring at Makoto Takahashi, who was looking smug, while suppressing his anger. Hey, 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 you little sister control, are you meddling too much? Makoto Takahashi shook his head helplessly, turned to Rina, who was blushing, and asked, which Rina? Tell me your true thoughts? My personal suggestion is that whether it is to prevent the organization's attack or to maintain the existing combat effectiveness, it is very necessary to stay with me tonight to replenish your magic. We have already signed a contract, right? After a moment of silence, Rina decisively ran away with a red face. This move is called shy escape. Tisk, you actually ran away, you're so shy. Takahashi Makoto, who wanted to chase after him, was forced back by Ogata Eiji's murderous gaze and complained helplessly, in that case, Ryoko, Let's finish the 3 chapters required for the serialization meeting first. After all, in the next few days, with the company of the witch, who would want to see the increasingly evil face of my cat, Mr. Yoshida knows that you will definitely be very sad when you say this to him. And, who is Lyozu referring to? This name is so effeminate and weird, could it be referring to me? Jinghe River shook his head helplessly, picked up the paintbrush and continued to work. The flight was delayed, which was a test of both physical and mental torture for both passengers and those waiting to be picked up. So I am very sorry to say that I originally planned to arrive last night, but I got home at 4 in the morning today, and then I rushed to work. There will only be one update today and tomorrow. I am very sorry. Let a certain cat take a rest and adjust. Although it is good to have a smooth journey, it is a pity that I didn't travel to another world and become Aotian. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 158. What is this? Looking at the comic manuscript in his hand, Yoshida's mouth twitched wildly and he entered a Spartan roaring state. This is the content of the first episode. The expressionless Jinghe said quietly, but as Yoshida's face became darker and darker, Jinghe's voice became smaller and smaller. Ah! Of course I know this is a manga manuscript. Yoshida has already fallen into a rage. But what's going on with this style of painting? This rough style of painting, could it be that guy Aiken who rushed out last night because he was serializing 3 comics at the same time and saw no time? What about others? Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow Diamond Suit. This is undoubtedly the new manga draft. Jinghe scratched his head and gave Yoshida a somewhat uncertain answer. It should be at Daihi Club now, right? The person who drove to pick them up before called himself it's Chenben from Daihi Club. Chenben from Daihi Club? Did Aiken say when he would be back? Yoshida sighed helplessly, then sat on the sofa with the comic manuscript, ready to look through it, but he still asked Jinghe. Aiken said. Jinghe hesitated for a moment, and under Yoshida's expectant gaze, slowly repeated the code that Takahashi Makoto left when he left. When the moon separates the two, the name the ferocious and crazy cartoonist of the Phoenix Academy will activate Angel Fall to replace the existence of the angel. The dark wings will guide the witch and the butler back to the barrier. Before Jinghe finished speaking, Yoshida was no longer in the mood to listen. As for the authenticity of Jinghe's words, Yoshida has never doubted it at all. After all, the only one who can say these words that fill Chuyune's airwaves is Takahashi Makoto. Tide and Tiger, this is the comic that Takahashi Makoto is preparing to submit for a new serialization. Like the ongoing series of Inuyasha and Slicker, it is also a manga from the yokai era. Although he had endless resentment for the style of this comic, Yoshida, as an editor, still suppressed his strong desire to complain and patiently looked through the comic manuscript in his hand. As the male protagonist of Chao and Tiger, Kanyu Chao was just a boy born in junior high school when he appeared on the stage. Kanyu Esheo, who has lived in a temple since childhood, does not believe that there are creatures like monsters in this world. Therefore, at the beginning of the comic, this boy who did not believe in the existence of monsters mocked his father unceremoniously while listening to the temple abbot's father telling him that there was a beast spear in the temple that could kill any monster. The repairs were miserable, and my dad ordered me to tidy up the warehouse. Seeing the quarrel between Kanyu Esheo and his son, although the conversation between the father and son was very interesting, Yoshida still frowned. As far as the beginning is concerned, this type of comics is very common in Shounen Jump, a typical Shounen comic style. Yoshida became a little confused. After all, just by reading the narrative method at the beginning of the comic, he could already guess the development of the subsequent story. A comic of this level cannot reach the level of Makoto Takahashi's past. Serializing 3 comics at the same time may be too much pressure for Cheng. If his talent for comics is wasted because of this, it will really be more than worth the gain. With doubts and worries, Yoshida couldn't help muttering in his heart, but he didn't stop flipping through the manga manuscript. The subsequent development of the story was pretty much what Yoshida expected. As a protagonist, you will always encounter some strange things. Whether it is a crisis or an emergency, the protagonist's personality characteristics will always be revealed through some small things. Tide and Tiger, like many shonen comics, also adopts the style of such a pattern. When Kanuesheo was in the truth warehouse, he discovered a strange door on the ground. Out of curiosity and confusion, Xiao Chao was about to open the door, but accidentally broke the door and fell into the basement. And in the basement, Xiao Chao saw the monster that his father had mentioned before, and the beast spear that could kill any monster. In the comic, a close-up is specially given. It was a disheveled monster with thick and powerful hands. The long nails on the fingertips made the hands look more like a pair of sharp claws. But what concerned Yoshida the most was the spear that penetrated the monster's right shoulder. This should be the beast spear mentioned in the comic before, right? Looking at the monster in the comic, begging Xiaoshio to pull out the spear, Yoshida probably guessed the subsequent development, but looking at the words of the monster in the comic, Yoshida was amused. Does this monster have a negative IQ? If you say something like this, who would let it out? After all, only humans can pull out this spear. Help me pull out this beast spear. Beast spear. Don't you know? This is a spear that devours human souls and can kill monsters. It's a bastard to the extreme. Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Please help me pull it out. If I help you pull out the beast spear, what will you do? Humph, do you need to say more? Of course I will eat you first, and then send all the nearby humans to hell. In Inuyasha, the half-demon Nariku is a master of conspiracy. In Slicker, even the Ushi-Uki who plans to launch a rebellion, before becoming a monster, was Umwakamaru, who was called a child prodigy. But the monster in The Tide and the Tiger obviously doesn't know how to lie, even though he obviously wants something from someone. Although the words are full of contempt for human beings, is this foolish and careless look a sign of pride in one's own strength? Or is there really something wrong with IQ? Xiaoshio did not pull out the beast spear, but kicked the beast spear hard, making the monster scream in pain. After that, Xiao Chao ran out and wanted to ask his father. But Xiao Chao didn't find his father. Instead, two female classmates came to visit. While talking with two classmates, Xiao Chao saw strange creatures floating in the air, but his two classmates couldn't see them at all. Like Xiaoshio, Yoshida thought that the monster had cast some kind of magic, so Xiaoshio could see these strange creatures. But as the comic develops, Xiao Chao realizes that the culprit of everything is the sealed monster. Those strange creatures that appeared before were the monsters attracted by the evil spirit emitted by this monster. Monster! Yoshida was completely speechless when he saw this. Although most of the monsters in Inuyasha are very strange beings, in the current serialized content, those monsters can more or less communicate with humans, not to mention the monsters in Slicker now, whether it's the male protagonist Rikuo Nuri who transforms into a monster at night, or the monsters of the Nuri group, they are more like a group of heroic hooligans than monsters. But in Tide and Tiger, these monsters can be said to be strange creatures. Some monsters are even prototypes of common animals in daily life, but they only have the ability to levitate and lack some body parts. In order to save his classmates who were surrounded by a large number of monsters, Xiaoshio pulled out the beast spear and released the sealed monsters as Yoshida expected. But unlike Yoshida's imagination, this monster had no credibility at all. After gaining freedom, he directly attacked Xiaoshio. Although the painting style of the comic is a bit rough, the fighting scenes are handled extremely well, without any delay, and the straightforward fighting style made Yoshida, who was not very accepting of the painting style at first, enjoy watching it. Especially after being attacked by a monster, Xiao Chao, who was holding a beast spear, suddenly had his hair grow wildly and his fighting power suddenly increased a lot. Just as the sealed monster said, he became the same as the one who sealed it 500 years ago. Warrior. The monster who had a strong fear of the beast spear was worried about being sealed again, so he had to compromise and agreed to help Zyashio deal with the monsters outside. In Inuyasha, the dog Inuyasha always uses gorgeous moves to destroy hostile monsters when fighting. In Slicker, Rikuo conquers hostile monsters with his strength and his own charm. However, in Tide and Tiger, unlike the two previously serialized monster comics, the battles between monsters are very straightforward. The free monster directly destroys monsters with violent means, although occasionally some thunder and lightning moves, but this kind of violent fighting with fists and fists, Yashida was stunned for a while. Even if the monsters attracted by the monster energy finally merged into a huge monster, they were still easily eliminated with the cooperation of Xiao Chao and the monster. After Xiao Chao used the beast spear for a short period of time, he also understood why the beast spear was powerful. Because this beast spear will swallow the soul of the user, allowing the user to confidently enter the beast mode when fighting enemies, it will become a being who only wants to defeat monsters. Smelly human being. Since I am not allowed to leave, then I will possess you. One day I will eat you. We absolutely cannot let this guy out to cause harm to the world. One day I will definitely use the beast spear to eliminate this guy. One person and one monster with different thoughts hid their own thoughts and temporarily entered a peaceful coexistence mode. Of course, for the convenience of naming, Xiao Chao named this monster Ahu. The content of the first episode ended in the bickering between Xiao Chao and Ahu. The name of this comic is Chao and Tiger, which refers to the story of Ken Yu Chao and Ahu. However, after reading the first chapter of the manga, Yashida finally understood why the style of this Ushio and Tora manga was so rough. If he were to paint the Tide and the Tiger in the same style as before, Yashida could well imagine that it would take a long time to finish drawing a large number of monsters. And more importantly, if a large number of monsters appear on the scene, if they are all drawn very carefully, there will be no sense of priority, and the existence of the protagonist will not be highlighted at all. This is definitely a failure for comics where the protagonist drives the development of the plot. That guy Chen is really. Yashida put down the comic manuscript in his hand, with a look of admiration on his face. 3 monster comics, but they are drawn in 3 different styles. The beauty of Inuyasha, the chicness of Slicker, the violence of Tide and the Tiger, this type of comics really needs a rougher style of painting to better reflect the charm of the comics. As the saying goes, although such a setting makes people complain, once you accept such a setting. This comic must be submitted to the serialization meeting this week, although there are still 2 chapters left to read. This comic called Ushio and Tora has conquered Yashida with its rough painting style and exciting battles. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 159. This resentment lingering in the dark world, it seems that there is nothing wrong here. Makoto Takahashi stopped, turned around and asked Sebastian behind him, "Do you feel it? This unusual darkness energy, it seems that the slime elite leader has also mastered the ambush strategy." "Oh, we've arrived, an overly excited voice suddenly sounded from the side. Makoto Takahashi and Sebastian followed the sound and saw a girl born 2 years ago. The man in the middle was jumping all the way. After seeing Takahashi Makoto, he stopped and shouted in surprise, "Oh!" The Phoenix Academy teacher found out. Oh, is this fate?" Makoto Takahashi looked at the man jumping over, with a smile on his face. "Long time no see, the king of Black Flame, and hi, who went astray because of love?" "Which?" The people who came face to face were the new wife Agi, and a certain siren girl Iwase Aiko who had been secretly in love with the yellow-haired glasses gentleman. As for the chubby editor Minato, he was completely ignored by Takahashi Makoto. "Oh, it's Mr. Kuma from the Phoenix Institute." In order to make his presence felt, editor Minato greeted him with a smile on his face and began to introduce the silent Iwase Aiko next to him. "This is the cartoonist Makoto Takahashi, whose pen name is Phoenix in Kuma." Aiko Iwase sighed, with a hint of hostility on his face. "Long time no see. I don't know what your purpose here is, Makoto Takahashi-san." "Oh? Does Mr. Akina actually know Mr. Phoenix Academy?" Eiji Shinzumo looked at Aiko Iwase in surprise, while Minotauro was a little embarrassed. After all, he who was about to make an introduction didn't know that the two of them had known each other before. "Iwase Aiko, the famous siren girl back then. We had crossed paths for a while during our training." Makoto Takahashi looked at the hostile Iwase Aiko over there with emotion, and said in a tone of voice it is full of the meaning of hating iron for not becoming steel. "During my practice, I once participated in the battle for the yellow-haired glasses king, but in the end I was defeated by the violent woman Myanji, and lost the yellow-haired glasses king. Speaking of which, you shouldn't save the master ball. If you throw it out directly, you will definitely capture the yellow-haired spectacled beast." Takahashi Makoto, a sharp cry broke through the sky, and the siren's killer move, called the soul-penetrating attack, was launched. "Is this the ambush of the leader of the slime elites?" Makoto Takahashi covered his ears, his face turned pale, and his speech became a little stuttering. "It is indeed a very powerful move. This is not the Stone of Destiny. Door, choice. Target Makoto Takahashi cannot fight." Makoto Takahashi fell. Even Sebastian, who always had a smile on his face, couldn't help but look sideways. Judging from the situation of the two people on the side who were pale and covered their ears with their hands, the siren girl activated a full-screen skill, regardless of the enemy or friend. After the blow, the only one standing in the audience was the siren girl, whose face was red from shyness and anger. "Hello, welcome." The receptionist of the CEO agency's face was full of doubts, and his tone became a little hesitant. After all, the group of people who just came in were very weird. Iwase Aiko, who was walking at the front, had an angry face and a mysterious aura that was domineering. The men who followed behind her all had pale faces, as if they had gone through an arduous war, well, except for the last one. That man dressed like a butler with a smile on his face. Aiko Iwase, who was walking at the front, suddenly stopped, and the group of people behind also stopped, keeping a distance of more than 3 meters from Aiko Iwase. Standing in front of Iwase Aiko was a woman with a face as delicate as a doll. She was none other than the voice actress Sister Yada, who had a lifelong agreement with Landai. Iwase Aiko's eyes flashed with hostility that came from nowhere, and she directly dragged her CEO's sister into a fighting state. "So, I'm here to resign today, because her dream with Landai was ridiculed by Iwase Aiko." The voice actor's sister's fighting power suddenly increased sharply, and she made a decision that surprised everyone with a firm face. "Humph. Stop joking. After hearing what I just said, I want you to play the role no matter what. I will make Sayano the best heroine. I will not allow you to refuse the role because of love. If you really refuse, it will cause a big problem." Darkening, darkening, Iwase Aiko has completely entered the darkening state. Although there is still a smile on his face, the black energy lingering all over his body, the existence named Aiko Iwase, has definitely broken through the level of a powerful person. It doesn't matter, the CEO's sister was not afraid at all of the blackened Iwase Aiko, and her clear eyes did not flinch at all, and she locked eyes with Iwase Aiko. Women are all such terrible creatures. Nyaizuma Eiji and Minotauro didn't dare to make a sound at all. Although the two women fell into the silence of the confrontation, they could feel the hostility between them. If you are involved in such a war, the result, as expected, staying silent at this time is the best choice. Ah, what an incomparably pleasant sound, just when the two were in a tense confrontation, just when Eiji Nizuma and Minotaur remained silent, Makoto Takahashi suddenly intervened. Shaking the white coat on her body, she stretched out her arms and praised with intoxication, because of love, the siren girl has been burdened with too much despair and anger at the moment, gathering the anger of the whole world, and transformed into the evil of this world. Also because of love, the voice actor's sister has gathered a lot of hopes and prayers at this moment, and will become a new shining star, turning into a shining good in the world. This comes from the battle between souls. This comes from the collision of love will, it's so exciting. The new wife Eiji and the editor from Minato, who were hiding aside to watch the show, swallowed unconsciously when they looked at the murderous eyes of the two women. Even if they were hiding aside, they could still feel the anger between the two women, and the fierce cartoonist named Phoenix Academy was actually still at this moment imitating Kim Bree and stepping forward to add fuel to the fire. Although it was successful, attracted the attention of two women, but the result. Phoenix Academy teacher, he is definitely dead this time. Heroes always appear at critical moments, because they can not only show the ability to turn the tide, but also capture the hearts of girls at the same time. So just when the siren girl and her voice actress sister were about to start a war, a disruptor named Landai appeared. Landai ran directly in front of the CEO's sister, grabbed her hand, and pulled the CEO's sister out of the fighting state. Because of the launch of the surprise tactic, everyone fell into a state of plummeting morale, and at the same time, everyone fell into dizziness and sluggishness. Although Eiji Nizuma formed an alliance with Aiko Iwase, he did not lose the right to make decisions. Regarding Landai's appearance, in the same way as in the comic novel, Nizuma Eiji was naturally dazzled and promised Landai that he would use all his rights to make his voice actor's sister lose the election. Such a speech, in addition to receiving the thanks from Landai, also further stimulated Siren Girl's nerves. Azumaiho, unforgivable, the Siren woman, whose anger level was already at the peak of her powers, had even begun to lose her mind. Her angry shouts echoed throughout the corridor. I will make her regret refusing to participate in the selection meeting. I must make it impossible for her to continue in the voice acting world. I also want to make it impossible for Ajuma Menha to draw comics. Ah, Makoto-kun, are you here already? Rina, who had just come down the stairs, was startled by Iwase Aiko's roar. She looked curiously at the siren girl who had been transformed into a berserker, feeling a little uneasy. He asked Makoto Takahashi, what happened? It was originally going to be a gorgeous battle, but one side quit midway because of the appearance of the disruptor, and the other side lost their mind because of the darkening anger. Makoto Takahashi shook his head helplessly, with a look of anticipation before. His expression was now filled with disappointment. It's really not beautiful. Oh, Miss Rina, it's been a while. Eiji, the new wife, immediately ran over, took out the signature pad from his pocket, and looked at Rina expectantly. Can you sign your name for me, Rina-chan? Did you do that before? I bought all the albums that were released. I'm a huge fan of yours. Thank you, Shinsuma-kun. Rina took the signature board with a smile on her face and began to write on it. She also praised her. Nutsuma-kun's comics are very interesting. I just heard the juniors say, wait a minute, we also need to select voice actors. Iwase Aiko, who came to her senses at the side, just nodded slightly to Rina, but her eyes kept looking up and down at Rina, and then she fell into deep thought. Just when Rina was about to leave with Makoto Takahashi, she suddenly called out to Rina. Are you interested in being Sayano's voice actor? Iwase Aiko looked at Rina, who was full of doubts, and immediately explained, she is the heroine in Arizuma-sensei's manga, I believe. Tisk, 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 that's not okay. Makoto Takahashi stood in front of Rina and looked at Iwase Aiko thoughtfully. Although I can generally understand your thoughts, it's a pity that I refuse. Say. Of course, if you persist, then please be prepared. A certain slime may suddenly evolve from an elite leader to a world-destroying demon king. Do you have the consciousness to return the world to chaos? Which? But Iwai's Aiko tried to keep trying, but when she saw Rina smiling and shaking her head, she knew there was no chance. Although I appreciate your kindness, I'm sorry, Ms. Iwais, because I don't plan to get involved in the field of voice acting at the moment. And Rina held Takahashi Makoto's arm with a happy smile on her face, and even if I want to enter the voice acting world in the future, as a voice actor, I will only appear in Chen-kun's cartoons. After all, supporting her husband's comics is what a wife should do. Big fire. Very hot. Previously, the CEO's sister and Landai, then Takahashi Makoto and Rina, showed off their affection one after another. The hostility of the entire world has been well conveyed to Iwai's Aiko, who has always been single. Humph. If that's the case. Iwai's Aiko suddenly took Nitsuma Eiji's arm and looked coldly at Makoto Takahashi and Rina in front of him. Nitsuma-kun and I will definitely make our comics a world first, become an invincible existence. Although a woman in an angry state is an irrational creature, she is also the most powerful existence. That's right. Although the purpose is different, I'm still a little unhappy about losing to Full Metal Alchemist before. Nizuma Eiji showed an expectant smile on his face. Teacher Howin, I heard from Yujiro before that you will submit a new comic after Full Metal Alchemist is finished. The style of Full Metal Alchemist before was a little difficult to deal with, but I think the new comic should not have the same style. Well, you will know after the new comic is serialized. Takahashi Makoto saw Ogata Eiji with a dark face at the door, shrugged helplessly, and ended the conversation with Nizuma Eiji. Now I have to go to the slime dungeon. As for the victory or defeat, let's keep it for the future battlefield. It seems that the comic Ushio and Tora is really not read by many people. It is said that Yobai also found some inspiration from it. I sincerely recommend it. This comic is very exciting. I hope you can read it when you have time. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 160. Yachin Mumenjai recently said that she is under a lot of pressure. After the first episode of PCP successfully ranked first, the ranking of PCP has been declining recently. Although I took a risk before and used the content of 3 chapters to tell an event and achieved good results, but if this strange trick is used too much, it will lose its freshness. Stories have always been told in the form of unit dramas. One episode tells a story. There seems to be no connection between the stories, but they can also become foreshadowing for each other. This is the biggest advantage of unit drama stories, and it is also the biggest disadvantage. Now, the best, Mr. Hattori said that Guy Aiken's new comic has passed the serialization meeting. The yellow-haired glasses man frowned, with a look of surprise on his face. That Guy Aiken, can't he really? Do you plan to continue the trend of serializing 3 comics at the same time? Kairan. Landai put down his brush with a confused look on his face and looked at his good friend partner. Now is not the time. Do you still remember the conditions we agreed to the editor-in-chief? If this continues, RPCP maybe. What are you looking at? I'm watching Aiken's Steel. The content of the last few chapters is really great, and the plot design is very good. The yellow-haired glasses man pushed up his glasses, with a look of amazement on his face. And is that Guy Aiken really a human being? We already feel that time is very tight just to serialize PCP, but that Guy Aiken, not to mention the serialization of 3 comics at the same time, the last one of Steel, the sketches for several chapters are really. As the saying goes, the speaker has no intention, but the listener has the intention. Although the yellow-haired glasses man was just complaining, Landai thought of something. He picked up the young junket hand and flipped through it quickly. The more he looked at it, the more solemn his face became. The man with yellow-haired glasses who noticed Lan Dai's unusual behavior naturally stopped complaining and looked at his good gay partner with a puzzled look on his face. Hey, Chi-Ren, do you feel that the style of our comics seems a bit dark? Lan Dai held the comic manuscript in his hand to compare it with the comic manuscript of Young Junk, with a trace of uncertainty on his face. His expression said, "Look at Cheng's steel, and then look at our PCP. That's true, but..." Standing up and comparing the two comics, the yellow-haired glasses man showed a trace of doubt on his face. "But aren't our comics more realistic? It's normal for the style to be darker." "Ah. No, that's not it." After a moment of silence, Lan Dai shook his head. "So I was thinking, should I give it a try and change the style of the comics to make the comics look a little brighter? After all, the style of juvenile comics is too dark. I don't know much about drawings, but since you said so, just do what you want," the yellow-haired glasses man said with a smile. "I just happened to think of an interesting story here. Just use a let's take a look at Makoto's new comics." Yeah, looking at the date marked on the wall, a trace of determination flashed across Lan Dai's face, and he held the paintbrush tightly in his right hand. Not to mention the energetic Ajumumenha here, the new wife AG who was looking at the sample magazine also put down the paintbrush in his hand for a rare moment. "Shinzuma-kun, this time the ranking of comics." When Yujiro was about to tell AG Nozuma the ranking results of comics, he found that the other party suddenly threw the sample magazine aside, picked up the brush and entered the drawing state, and had to stop talking. "Mr. Yujiro, how long until the next chapter is due?" AG Nozuma asked Yujiro without looking back while he was drawing. "There are still 3 days left." Looking at his new wife AG with a puzzled face, Yujiro was about to ask a question when the doorbell rang. Iwai's Aiko put on light makeup today and carried a small bag. After slightly nodding to Yujiro who opened the door, he knelt down behind his new wife AG, took out a book from the bag, and read it without saying a word. With the right way, he explains on the self-cultivation of a quiet and beautiful woman. "Mr. Yujiro, please come and pick up the Crow manga manuscript in 3 days. AG Nozuma suddenly tore up the previous manga manuscript and threw it to the ground, with an expectant smile on his face. "This chapter of Crow needs to be done again." "Ah, Nozuma-kun." Seeing Nozuma AG tearing the manga manuscript into pieces, Yujiro went crazy and roared loudly, "Why?" "Because we can't win." Nozuma AG turned around, looked at the surprised Yujiro, and smiled confidently. "I'm really looking forward to the new manga by Phoenix Academy teacher. I lost to Steel before. Although there are some reasons, I don't want to lose in this new comic. But it's not that." Looking at the drawings scattered on the ground, Yujiro's face was very puzzled. Even if he was dissatisfied with his comics, it wouldn't be to this extent, right? "Don't you understand, Mr. Yujiro?" AG Shinzuma's scream was louder than Yujiro's previous roar. "It is absolutely impossible to win, but only to this extent. So we need to redraw it." Although Aiko Iwais had been reading a book, she was listening carefully to the conversation between the two. The feeling of wanting to win is the same, but to be honest, Aiko Iwais doesn't think her manga will lose to Makoto Takahashi. Aiko Iwais is naturally aware of the changes in the style of painting when metal is nearing completion, but she also firmly believes that in addition to the quality of the drawings in comics, the storyline is also very important. At this point, Iwais Aiko, who has never watched Full Steel seriously, is confident that she can write a story that is not inferior to anyone else. Since you have chosen to be the original author of comics, you must have this confidence. Whether it's a wildly imaginative manga like Phoenix Inferno Kuma or an evil manga like Ajumumenha's eccentric swordsmanship, now that she has become an opponent, Iwais Aiko will not back down and is confident that she can write a better story. It's not that you don't overestimate your capabilities, or that you're a frog in a well and don't know how high the sky is. It's your own reserve and pride. The heart of a strong man is always a sword, so he can protect all the weak and kill all strong enemies. The heart of a weak man is always a wound, so he can avoid all difficulties and fear all enemies. Although the new comic Ushio and Tora has passed the serialization meeting, there is still a little time before publication. Although he had told Makoto Takahashi the news over the phone, Yoshida still dutifully made a trip in person and planned to come to Takahashi Makoto to tell him the news. The mind and heart are one, blending into the rhythm of breathing between putting down and lifting up the pen. Yoshida came to visit and saw Makoto Takahashi guiding Shizukawa to draw the manga manuscript, with a smile on his face. It seems that as the editor-in-chief thought, Shizukawa, an introverted cartoonist, might gain more from Takahashi Makoto than he imagined. However, Yoshida's good mood did not last long. Takahashi Makoto's next words directly put Yoshida into a petrified state. "That's right, release the resentment and hatred that have accumulated in your heart for a long time. Hatred of the corruption of this world, disgust of ignorant human beings, want to destroy everything, At this moment you are no longer Jinghe River, but the world-destroying monster. Sympathy and pity, these simple and boring emotions are all abandoned, only hatred is left, only anger is left." "Cheng, what are you talking about?" Seeing that the two of them were concentrating entirely on the comics, Yoshida became more and more uncomfortable as he listened. He immediately rushed over and stopped Takahashi Saichuji's brainwashing wave. "Don't just instill some middle-class ideas into Jinghe. Humph. My beloved is a cat, you are the one who is in the middle school, okay? Tisk tisk tisk, it seems you don't know about Ryako's special ability." Makoto Takahashi looked up at Yoshida, with disdain on his face with a smile. "Do you know why I let Lyoza choose to be in charge of this comic? The reason for letting the new assistant be responsible for the manga that was just serialized is not the same as Mayuri and the others." Yoshida stopped mid-sentence. The way Makoto Takahashi shook his head and the disdainful expression on his face made Yoshida famous. A premonition of misfortune. It's not so much that Ryako and Tide and Tiger unexpectedly coincided with each other in terms of sexual orientation, it's better to say that we have a common long-cherished wish to make the despicable species called human beings disappear from this planet. Makoto Takahashi looked at it. Jinghe, the assistant who is serious about painting, has a look of expectation on his face. Without any verbal communication, I have understood everything through Lyoza's comic Zion Ben. Lyoza is the darling of darkness and the descendant of the devil. But if you want to exterminate mankind, this level is not enough. Seeing Makoto Takahashi speaking his thoughts enthusiastically, Yoshida was speechless. Destroying the world and annihilating mankind, something that sounds very terrifying, can be said so enthusiastically and piously. Should it be said that Takahashi Sei's illness is not serious? Or do we mean that all Chuyunibu exist like this? The evil-minded Makoto Takahashi did not tell Yoshida the real reason for making Shizukawa the director of Tide and Tora. Although the style of the manga Tide and Tiger complements the manga, it is undeniable that such a style of painting is indeed an unavoidable flaw for the manga. It is absolutely not possible to change the painting style. After all, changing such a violent and straightforward comic to a delicate and beautiful painting style will definitely be counterproductive. Not to mention having your cake and eat it too, the final result will naturally be to draw water from a bamboo basket. Therefore, in order to make up for the problems in the painting style, we can only improve it in other aspects. Since the style of painting is not enough, let's compare it from the perspective of characters. In Inuyasha, the focus is on the relationship between monsters and humans. In Slicker, more emphasis is placed on the heroic loyalty between monsters and monsters. Although the two comics have different emphases, in general, it shows more of the good side of monsters. But Tide and Tiger is completely different. In the first episode, it is just the debut of the two protagonists. From the following content, more emphasis is placed on the murderous and cannibalistic nature of the monsters. What is the purpose of comics in the era of monsters? It's a monster. It can be imagined that when readers have become accustomed to the plot of humans and monsters protecting each other in Inuyasha, and when readers have become accustomed to the heroic relationship between monsters and monsters in Slicker, they gradually felt in their hearts, when I thought that monsters are also sentient beings, I suddenly saw the cruel and murderous side of the monsters in Tide and the Tiger. I guess such an impact would be very loving, right? The contrast between good monsters, evil monsters, and monster natures is the essence of the entire monster era. Finally, I have recovered some energy. By the way, has a certain cat contracted the disease of getting sick as soon as I returned from a business trip? I just came back from the capital, and then I caught a cold and had a fever. Oh, if I want to travel through time in the future, I will go on a spontaneous trip.